Okay, welcome back to the public hearings of the House Environment and Transportation Committee. I am the chairman, Kumar Barve. I'm joined by the vice chair, Dana Stein, and a good group of my fellow inmates in the committee. So we are going to have 4 bills today, and 2 of them are by some guy named Barve, and they should be relatively quick. And then there's a bill, House Bill 483. Well, let me go through the list. 480, Delegate Barve, 519, Delegate Barve, 483, Delegate Turner, and 494, Delegate Stewart. And I am going to time myself because I time everybody else. So if you can put up the clock. Okay, let's begin. House Bill 480 is a bill that's intended to make it possible for people with electric cars to actually park in the spaces allotted to electric cars. As many of you know, my wife and I live in Annapolis during the 90-day session, and she works out. I don't work out at all, I'm too lazy, but she goes to the Pip Moyer Center, which is a municipal gym. And she has never once been able to park her car in the electric car charging spot to, add a couple of miles while she's on the treadmill or whatever she's doing, because there are gasoline cars always parked there. And one time she gently complained to the management, and they said, well, it's not illegal, so there's nothing we can do about it. Luckily for her, she's married to the chair of the Environment and Transportation Committee. So what this bill does is it would prohibit stopping, standing, or parking a vehicle in a designated plug-in electric drive charging space unless the car is capable of charging, which means either a pure electric car or a plug-in hybrid. The civil penalty would be $100, but really the hope here is that we don't have to actually cite people for this, and instead, we'll make those spots available for electric vehicle users. And that's the end of my testimony. You will note that I did not even use half the time allotted to me, hint, hint. So let me call up the first witness who is going to testify in favor of the bill, Lanny Hartman, and he will be followed by Joel Hurwitz, and both of them have amendments. So Lanny, take it away. You've got 2 minutes. Welcome to the Environment and Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Barve. I appreciate the problem that your wife has parking at or trying to park in front of a charging station. I'm standing at a charging station right now, and years ago, I would come here when the charging station was first installed, and it was constantly blocked by gasoline cars. Thanks to Delegate Terraza, who was at the time my council representative, we got a law passed in Howard County. And since then, we got a sign at this charging station. It denotes that it's for electric cars only, and it denotes that there is a penalty if you park here. And what do you know? Since the sign has been put up, I've never seen a single gas car blocking this. Your bill does the same thing, Chairman, and I support it. There's just one amendment that I would ask for, and that would be for any charging provider that uses public money or puts charging stations on public property, that they actually be required to put up the signs. Because without the signs, there's no enforcement. In my written testimony, I included the information from the Howard County Police, their enforcement actions, and they actually require these signs before they can write a ticket. So thank you for this bill. I urge a favorable report and hope you will consider the amendments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a pretty reasonable amendment. And of course, it is always great to follow the lead of Jen Terraza. Next, Joel Hurwitz. Joel, are you out there? Or in here or wherever? Well,
We didn't see him in the waiting room, sorry.
Okay, well, that's fine. Any questions for me or Lanny Hartman? Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great bill. And thank you, Mr. Hartman. In journalism, we would call that a man on the street interview. That's funny that he's out there in the field showing us a space with a sign. Mr. Chairman, do you specify in the bill who would be, what agency or entity would have to, or would they have to put up a sign indicating that, you know, that this is the law now and there's a penalty associated with?
I mean, I believe, you know, I drafted the bill so long ago, I can't remember. I think right now there's a requirement for marking on pavement, but I'm totally open to whatever the subcommittee wants to do, whatever is appropriate.
No, I just think that's important to address, since I might not have thought of it, except that Mr. Hartman is standing near that sign and talking about how effective it's been. So
yeah, I think that's pretty sensible. And like, my goal is not to raise a single penny in fines. It's just to educate the public and make sure this is available to people. Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. How is that fine in comparison to, say, parking in a handicapped spot? Are they about the same?
It's not nice being stumped by the members of your own committee, but we'll find out. I think it's about the same, but I can't really remember.
Yeah. Jen seems to have an answer.
Jen, do you want to answer a question I should be able to answer?
I mean, I know what it is in Howard County is much higher for parking handicap zone.
I mean, I think it should be.
Ours is probably 370. I think it's about 375 for parking in handicap zone.
Okay, I was just curious if you know how they would equate the two. That's the only thing I had.
Right, and you know, I think parking in a handicap zone is probably worse in my mind. So, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
I don't want to date myself, but some years ago, I think in Montgomery County, it was somewhere around 250. It's probably higher than that now, but I'm sure we'll figure all of that out in subcommittee.
You know, I'm a good 20 years older than you. You don't have to worry about dating yourself around me.
Thank you.
Okay, any, Delegate Healy.
Yeah, I just had a question about, on private property, will they be required to put the signs up there as well? Would it be enforced by private, like I know they have these at the Whole Foods in my district. So I just assume that somebody who patrols and makes sure people don't park there too long would also patrol that. But I'm not sure if, are the private companies required to put these in place or only to put the signs up if they have them?
Well, I don't think my bill requires it of private property, but I will say that, like the giant grocery store in Rockville, where they have 2 charging stations, it's very clearly marked, although obviously it's not marked as to a fine or a penalty. You know what? We'll have David figure this all out.
Okay.
Happy to.
Okay. Any further questions before we move on to my next stupid bill? Okay, let's move on to my next stupid bill. This is a bill, House Bill 519 is a request by the industry that replaces the Auto Glass Safety Council is desiring to pass legislation to begin the process of model legislation in the United States at the state level. And basically what the bill does is it requires the Motor Vehicle Administration to adopt regulations establishing standards and requirements for the aftermarket safety glass replacement in the state of Maryland. And this is, you know, these are like the Safe Light and the people who replace, who either fix your windshield or replace it. It seems to me to be reasonable for the state of Maryland to have reasonable regulations on this topic. Let me go through all the people who are signed up to testify, and then we can entertain questions. So I was even under 1 minute there. So Deborah Levy, Ted Anderson, and then favorable with amendments, Bryson Popham. So let's start with Deborah Levy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the privilege of speaking before you today. I am Deb Levy and I serve as the president of the Auto Glass Safety Council, or AGSC for short. AGSC is a not-for-profit safety organization dedicated to the proper installation of auto glass. We have members in all 50 states and 6 countries. AGSC's members are installation companies and technicians, suppliers of materials such as glass and adhesives, insurance companies, safety advocate, and those who provide information and services about auto glass. The council manages a robust training and certification program. It provides education events online and in person. It produces materials to educate the public about safe installations. Members also participate in random on-site third-party audits of their installation practices and procedures. AGSC has also developed the Automotive Glass Replacement Safety Standard, called AGRESS. It developed it under the auspices of ANSI, a leading safety standards setting organization. The AGRESS standard is evaluated and updated as new technologies such as advanced driver assistance systems are developed. I invite members of the committee to view the links to the video news reports that have been provided with my written testimony, most notably the 2020 report, to see how important a safety issue this is. The AGRESS standard itself is only 8 pages, including the definitions. It's very easy to understand and follow. It covers proper installation procedures as well as vehicle assessment, education, training, and more. In my role as a glass safety advocate, I sometimes talk to technicians who express ignorance of the standard, or worse, who know about it and say they don't need to follow it because it's voluntary and it's not the law. You can change that today for the safety of everyone in Maryland with the passage of HB 519. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, let me recognize Ted Anderson of Novus Glass. Ted, are you there? Apparently not. Okay, so let's go to favorable with amendments. Bryson Popham. Bryson, welcome to the environment and.
Can I interrupt? We do
Yeah.
person in the waiting room. We just let him in
Oh, okay, hold off, Bryson.
before you go to favorable with amendment.
Yeah, okay, we'll wait for Ted Anderson to get in and get situated.
There he is.
Ted? Mr. Anderson?
Sorry, I was muted.
That's okay.
Can you
Welcome
hear
to the committee. You've got 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ted Anderson. I am the Vice President of Novus Franchising. We are a worldwide auto glass services company with locations throughout the US as well as in Maryland. I also serve as a board member on the Auto Glass Safety Council, and I've been in the auto glass industry for 28 years. I'm here today in support of House Bill 519 for safety reasons. Glass and the windshield in particular are integral parts of the safety system for vehicles. We call it kind of a safety cocoon almost. So things like airbags, if installation is not done properly, airbags, when they deploy off your windshield. If that windshield is not installed properly, that windshield could be removed, which leaves the occupants of the vehicle in danger. In every vehicle glass replacement, the materials must be properly installed and must be done correctly. The National Highway Safety Administration, or NHTSA, regulates the performance and specifications of each piece of glass. However, NHTSA does not regulate the installation of glass in the aftermarket. That falls to the states. It's important for safety of Marylanders that glass installation be done in accordance with the safety standards developed for aftermarket installations. In this case, the Auto Glass Replacement Safety Standard, or AGRESS for short, is the standard that was developed and approved by ANSI. So we have about 165 franchisees in the United States, and all of our franchisees follow the AGRESS standard. and make sure that installation is done properly. So we do support it, and we feel that it should be made and put into law.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Bryson Popham. Bryson, welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Members of the committee, Bryson Popham, here in support of House Bill 519 with amendments. I'm here today representing Safe Light Group. Safe Light is the industry leader in this field, and I have no issue whatsoever with the EGRIS standard that's been presented to you accurately and well by the previous witnesses. I will only add that Safe Light participates in the process of reviewing EGRIS. Mr. Chairman, this is not a stupid bill. I'm sure you were being facetious. But if you'll recall, I opined to you that you might be opening Pandora's box. And here's what I meant by that. It's one thing to establish the standard, but you also have to have an enforcement mechanism for it. And I have spoken with the Motor Vehicle Administration. I believe you may have a letter of information from them. And they confirmed our belief that there is no regulatory authority in the NBA or anywhere else that I'm aware of for confirming and ensuring compliance with these standards. So adoption of the standard is important, but it's only part of the equation, which gets me to the recommended amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I hope you will consider it. I believe that the other piece of this issue that really needs to be addressed is perhaps a summer study, but certainly a study to examine how this regulation might be enforced, by whom, and on behalf of my client, Safe Light, we would welcome the opportunity to participate in such a study. So I hope you and the committee will consider that as a friendly amendment. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I noticed that Patrick Heflin is signed up informationally and wants to testify, I believe. So Mr. Heflin, go ahead. You've got 2 minutes. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Patrick Heflin, and I'm with the regional manager for Glass America, a national auto glass chain. Here in Maryland, we install on average about 10,000 pieces of glass in the state a year. I'm here to support HF19 for a number of reasons, including this very important one. The Auto Glass Replacement Safety Standard, AGRIS, is an ANSI standard that involves changing technology. And at no time has a vehicle technology been changing as fast or elaborately as it is today. Take, for example, the relatively new advanced driver assist systems, ADAS for short. These systems do everything from alert drivers if they are drifting out of their lane, slowing the car down and braking if they neglect to do so. You may have some or all of these features on your vehicle depending on its age. A very small camera, usually mounted in the center of the windshield, works in tandem with the car's computer to keep the ADAS systems operating properly. Something as simple as cleaning the camera lens can throw the system off. Whenever the camera looks through a new substance, such as a new windshield, it must be recalibrated to be sure it's operating properly. This is an important safety issue, as having the camera positioning off even a minuscule amount can affect its proper operation. This problem often can show up well after it was touched or the windshield was installed. Glass shops performing safe installations know how to handle ADAS. It is addressed in the AGRIS standard and continues to be updated in response to the new technology. It's very tough for the companies that do this work properly and safely to see other technicians who say things like, "We don't touch the camera, so it doesn't need to be recalibrated." They are jeopardizing their customer safety. These technicians will often say there is no law that they have to follow the standard, so they don't. By making F19 law, you further protect the driving public and show all installers that by law they must do right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of questions. The first question goes to Delegate Wyville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious, and maybe I missed it. How many states have adopted the standard? Do we know?
I don't think any have yet. I may be wrong. If somebody wants to correct me, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that they are included in the California bar regulations, and I believe there have been a couple of bills up in a few other states, including New York, that died with the end of the session last year due to COVID. I expect them to be reintroduced.
Okay, so probably only California then. Okay,
All right, thank you.
okay, Delegate Healy.
My
Delegate
question,
Healy, yeah.
yeah, my question is for Bryson Popham. The amendments that you're asking for a study. I think that I'm not necessarily sure that a study done by this committee is necessarily the best way to handle this. Maybe we should ask the department to offer us recommendations. They have a rulemaking and they make regulations all the time. If they need some kind of direction or further authorization, they should be able to let us know what that is. Do you have language for specific, maybe what they're doing in California? I just, I don't think that necessarily spending the committee's time researching this is necessarily the best way to go about it.
Delegate Healy, thank you for that question. No, I do not have language, and you made a couple of very good suggestions. I was simply recounting to the committee my conversation with the Motor Vehicle Administration. You can certainly ask them how they might go about enforcing this. I will tell you this, once a windshield is installed, it's really very difficult, if not impossible, to determine if it was done properly. So one important aspect of this that my client feels very strongly about is consumer protection. That is stopping a problem before it occurs. So they pointed out that they have no regulatory authority over this industry. And I think that's an issue that someone should look at, whether it's the NBA, whether California has already done that, or whether it's this committee. It's consumer protection that we're most concerned about.
Right. Okay, thank you. I'll address my questions to the MVA. Thank you.
Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. I tell you, I'm never cease to be amazed at the things I learned in this committee by things just aren't, you just never would think about or you take for granted. Isn't that so?
It is. It is. Delegate Terraza.
Wouldn't this, I'm not sure, I'm having a little trouble with my monitor here, so I'm not sure. I think this is from
We can
Mr.
see and
Popham,
hear you.
Right, but I'm not seeing the people I'm talking to, so I apologize. So wouldn't, I realize that this is after the fact, but wouldn't one of the enforcement mechanisms be that they would be subject to lawsuit and liability? And I understand that's after the fact, but I would think that companies would be concerned about the possibility of a lawsuit if this is the standard.
Delegate Terraza, I'll give you a highly personal response to that question. The answer is yes, that would be a remedy. I've been a lawyer for almost 40 years, and I always tell people that litigation is the last worst method of dispute resolution. That's why we have regulatory agency for any number of activities. And we think that in this, you've already heard testimony about the safety issues involved with this. It's pretty important. If we can prevent violations from taking place rather than afford injured people a remedy that they have to go to court for, I think prevention is the goal that we ought to be considering first.
Did I speak to
Right,
that?
but might it make sense? Oh, sorry.
Is it all right if I speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I think one of the major issues is the fact that the standard as it exists is voluntary. Our members are audited. They have independent third-party auditors come in and on a random basis and check that they're following the procedures. So the companies that are doing it right, and many of them are audited. It's the other players that we need your help with. We are trying to make sure that the industry realizes and that consumers realize that there are rules that need to be followed in terms of how they install. If you look over all of the systems in your car, it's unlikely that many of them have that type of enforcement around them as well, but people still follow the law.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, if I
any
could just
further?
follow up. Oh.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I just,
ahead.
Mr. Popham, then wouldn't it make sense to, thank you. Wouldn't it make sense then to put this into effect, and then if you wanted to take a look at it, think of other potential, I mean, I agree with you that the last place you want to enforce something is in a lawsuit, but it seems to me like it would make sense to get this moving and get people safe with that.
Taraz, I'm sorry you broke up on me there. I didn't understand your question. Would you mind restating it?
Yeah, I was just, yeah, I'm sorry. Everything's breaking up here. So I think it's where my computer is. I apologize. Can you guys hear me?
I can. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, everybody's frozen for me, so I'm not sure what's happening. Wouldn't it make sense to then get this moving? And even though I agree that going to court is your last best remedy, but get this moving so that we're keeping people safe while anybody is free to study it.
I don't mean to suggest, Delegate Terraza, in my testimony that you shouldn't get it moving, and I
Okay.
applaud the sponsor, but I do think this is an important issue. It should be reflected somehow in the language of the bill, a direction to the NBA or something that moves the process ahead. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions on this bill? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the public hearing. I think there's nobody else signed up to testify. Wait, oh yeah, right. Nobody else has signed up to testify, so that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 519. Let's proceed to House Bill 483. Delegate Turner is in the House, so welcome, Delegate Turner. And you have 4 minutes, which is 2 and 2, and you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I got it now.
Got it, good.
Thank you. Good afternoon, esteemed colleague. For the record, I am Delegate Veronica Turner, and the bill before you is HB 483, towing or removing of the vehicles from the parking lot reclamation hours. I was before you last year to present this piece of legislation that will decrease the hours in which a person can reclaim their car when towed from a private parking lot, therefore increasing the level of the safety and the protection of the tow truck driver. This bill came out of this committee unanimously last year and almost unanimously in the House. A quick reminder about one of the several reasons for this bill. On Sunday, October the 6th, 2019, the police was called to a towing company in College Park where Tyrese Butler lost his life at the hands of Damon Howard, who strangled him to the death, allegedly just as the officer was arriving over a towing fee when his credit card was denied. This bill is to protect the tow truck driver from raising the level of violence and occur against them under the cover of the night when people are angry or intoxicated. It is protect them when they have been contacted by the private owner to tow and that are parked illegally. There is no more lying in wait for these tow truck operators. From recently, since the pandemic, there has been no decrease in incident. Other tow truck drivers share a story when the drivers refused to pay the amount due to FaceTime or would be appliance with so that the tow driver could be identified to shoot in the future. The letter of opposition from the Consumer Division applaud the change in this bill, but feel it still falls short. It is important to note that the bill reads at a minimum from 6 a.m. to 12 midnight. Companies can remain open for 24 hours at their discretion, as well as reopen to release a car. We don't protect consumers who are breaking the law. However, protections were but in place to make life more convenient for drivers with a focus on marginalizing communities in order to keep from having their livelihood compromised through an amendment that was placed on this bill last year. This is in the current form. I urge a favorable report for HB 483. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I remember the testimony from last year. You had a guy who'd been shot and beaten. I guess this is one of those bills that ran out of time last year. Is that what happened?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to Charles Parrish and Michael Arrington are both signed up favorable. So Mr. Parrish, welcome to the committee, and you've got 2 minutes. Welcome. You need to unmute yourself. It's a button on the bottom left.
Got it. Okay,
There we
can you hear
go.
me now?
Yep.
It's new to this Zoom. I'm old school.
That's cool.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson and committee members. And I do remember this bill, and I appreciate the delegate bringing this back. Last year, I am the legislative trespassing chairman for the Towing Recovery Professionals of Maryland. I do understand the consumer side, but the increase in violence against us, we are in a complaint-driven industry. Nobody wakes up to see us, nobody. These are trespassing violations that we're talking about, whether it be a handicap space, a permit parking lot, a fire lane, a disabled vehicle, whatever reason. These are not innocent tows that are being done. Throughout the state of Maryland, any municipality, some which have police at their locations, the latest in the state that anybody is open is 7 p.m. The earliest that any of the municipality lots open is 8 a.m. Through my 30 years of doing this, it has gotten worse as far as the violence goes. 95% of the attacks on our dispatchers. We don't have the money to provide besides security camera and individuals and the tow truck driver. They are not armed. We are not allowed, nor do I want them armed. But the attacks against our employees is happening after the midnight hour. It's happening when most of the alcohol consumption is being consumed too much by some individuals. And I am strongly, along with the Towing Recovery Professionals of Maryland, we are strongly in support of this bill and hope that this will pass. Like the delegate said, it's a minimum. Jurisdictions under 2110A can still make it mandatory, but at least this will give us an opportunity on the local level to combat it. Thank you for your time, and I hope you do consider this.
Thank you very much. This is I was reminded by staff council, we did pass this last year, and it just ran out of time. So Mr. Arrington, welcome back to the Environment and Transportation Committee. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Barve, and thank you, members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity again this year to come back and testify on behalf of HB 483. For the record, my name is Michael Arrington. My company is Capital Connections at 18 West Street in Annapolis, Maryland. Mr. Chairman, I represent about 20 tow companies from around the state. And I want to thank the committee for its wisdom in passing this same bill, although it was a different number last year. Mr. Parrish has made the points, and Delegate Turner, who I want to thank for being our sponsor, has made all the arguments in terms of why we need this legislation passed. The thing that I just want to point out 2 points that have been made. One is the same tow companies that provide services to government agencies also provide the service to private property owners. With the private, that same tow company has to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the consumer who has had their car towed from a private property. But if a police officer sees an abandoned car in the middle of Roe Boulevard and he or she has that car towed, you can only reclaim that car during certain hours. Usually those hours are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So we think to be consistent with hours across the board, whether you're towing for private companies or government, or you're a contractor with the government, there should be consistent hours. And the basis of that is safety. We all heard from our grandparents and parents and great grandparents years back, nothing really good happens after, midnight. Okay. And so the type of element that's actually trying to reclaim a car, generally speaking, at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning is a bad element. And our tow truck operators are vulnerable as a result of that. And again, the last point I'd make is we're not talking about people who haven't done anything wrong. Typically, these are people who have broken the law or regulation regarding parking. So having said that, Mr. Chairman, again, I'd like to thank the committee for passing this legislation and would ask respectfully that you give us an opportunity to present it to the Senate this year by.
Okay. We've got a couple of questions here. First, Delegate Healy, then Delegate Boyce.
I just wanted to welcome Michael Arrington back. As you may remember, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah.
Michael was a member of the class of 1990. He was,
yep.
Was elected to the House of Delegates with us.
I remember that well. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back.
Yep. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much. And I too remember this last year. I'm sorry I didn't make it to the true finish line, but I wanted to ask a question about the hours and retrieving a vehicle as it relates to costs. And so I am certainly understanding and sympathetic to this issue, but I'm wondering how this affects for those of us who aren't naughty after midnight or doing bad things, how this affects the cost to retrieve a vehicle. For some people, once it's on the lot, the time ticks. And so if I then can't get my vehicle until a certain time, and I guess that's different for every tow company, but I'd be curious to know about the cost, because I think that's also usually the tension in a lot of these instances are the fees, right? Like nobody wants to be towed, and I've been towed, and I've said a lot of bad things to myself because I was towed, but essentially, of course, it's my fault, but there are additional fees when the car is held at the lot at a certain time. And so I'm wondering about the time it's on the lot versus when fees start to accumulate.
Well, I would just say, Delegate Boyce, thank you for the question. For my clients, my understanding generally, and Mr. Parrish has been in the industry for 30 years, can answer as well, but typically the clock starts, you have 24 hours to reclaim your car. And so that will cover the time. So if it happened in the evening and you can't get your car until the following morning, that would cover any storage fees that typically are charged after 24 hours of holding the car.
If I may, can I?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Unmute again. Oh, okay. Actually, throughout the state, Mr. Arrington's correct. You either have a 12-hour window before you can charge storage, or the other jurisdictions have a calendar day, which means at midnight anyway, storage wouldn't start again until midnight of that evening. So the 6-hour window would not affect any jurisdictional cost in extra storage.
No, thank you. And I just wanted to point that out as a factor of course, why people sometimes get violent is because, it was their fault or not, money is always at the tension of all these issues. So I just wanted to ask that question. Thanks so much.
Before we leave this bill, I have a question for the sponsor. Is there a Senate cross file for this bill? Do you know? Because I
didn't see one.
Delegate Chairman Barber, there is not.
No,
Okay.
I was
All right.
muted. I'm sorry, Chairman.
No, that's okay. That's okay. No problem. Okay. Thank you very much, Delegate, and the witnesses on your bill. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 483, and we will go to the last, believe it or not, House Bill 494, Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think there are no witnesses, so I'm the last thing for us today. For the record, I'm Delegate Vaughn Stewart. This is HB 494. While Groundhog Day is over, it is deja vu all over again in our committee because I am back with my second and final bill on dangerous driving. So too often, as everyone knows, Maryland motorists treat posted speed limits as decorative suggestions rather than enforceable law. Vehicle miles traveled in our state continue to fall, but crash-related injuries and deaths continue to rise. So Maryland, I was actually shocked to see Maryland is third in the country in the number of traffic crashes per year per capita. Each year, nearly 600 Marylanders die and nearly 50,000 are injured in crashes. And this pre-existing problem has only been exacerbated by the pandemic because the emptier roadways have led to a flood of reckless motorists eager to test the limits of their vehicles. Over the interim, Senator Ben Cramer and I collaborated with law enforcement officials about potential legislative solutions that the General Assembly could pursue to help law enforcement deter dangerous and reckless driving. As I mentioned, we heard the companion bill a couple of weeks ago, which specifically targets those who engage in drag racing. This bill instead focuses on those who drive dangerously, but not necessarily because they're racing another vehicle. They just may be solo or whatever. They're not really racing, they're just driving recklessly. When we spoke to law enforcement, they again and again cited Virginia as an example of a state that has successfully cracked down on dangerous motorists. In fact, Virginia has been so effective that a flood of dangerous drivers are breaching the border to use our roads. And to quote a former president, they are not sending their best. So HB 494 takes a page out of Virginia's transportation code. It would establish that a motorist who exceeds the posted speed limit by 20 miles per hour or more would automatically be guilty of reckless driving. Currently, driving between 20 and 29 miles per hour over the speed limit, it's a scheduled $160 fine. If you do 30 to 39 miles over, it's a scheduled $290 fine, while reckless driving is $510, with a maximum, though it's rarely given out, of $1,000. Reckless driving in Maryland is currently undercharged, it's underused because it features a hopelessly vague standard in our transportation code. It is defined as driving, quote unquote, in wanton or willful disregard for the safety of persons or property, or in a manner that indicates a wanton or willful disregard for the safety of persons or property. This subjective standard provides little for law enforcement officers to go on. HB 494 would provide law enforcement with a more objective standard for reckless driving, and it would be another tool in their toolbox to help keep Marylanders safe. I asked my previous witnesses to stay home just for the sake of brevity, but if you take a look at the written testimony, you'll see we managed to unite, I think maybe for the first time ever, abate the motorcycle group with the Sierra Club on this issue. The bill also, I would just want to note, would require right now in its current state for motorists to appear in court to pay their fine, though I understand that the chairman doesn't like that idea, so I'm happy to take that out because I am nothing if not loyal to my chairman. I urge a favorable report.
Well, you know, I don't know. I mean, I was shocked, I say shocked to hear you quote President Trump in your testimony. I mean,
you know, I just said a former president. There may be multiple presidents who have said similar things.
Right. Okay. Well, you know, I'm not in favor of dragging people into court. I mean, I think that would be a terrible inconvenience to Delegate Ciliberti. So, okay, we have a couple of questions. Of course, I'm joking. For the people on the internet who have no sense of humor, I'm of course joking. First, Delegate Ruth, then Delegate Jacobs, then Delegate Lehman and Love so far.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was wondering how you arrived at 20 miles over as the point that you.
Yeah, I didn't. That's what Virginia does. And so the law enforcement officers here in Maryland said, copy Virginia. So we copied Virginia. Now I'm open, I'm flexible. You know, if Delegate Fraser Hidalgo and his subcommittee think that 20 is a little too low, I'm not doctrinaire. You know, I would take 30. I know that on the Senate side, you know, Senator Kramer has the cross file. I know the Senate JPR committee, there are a few senators in that hearing who said they'd be more amenable to 30 rather than 20. So I'm open to that, but Virginia does 20.
But before I recognize the next person, I noticed that my car, when I get on Route 50, it's 55 miles an hour. My car says 55, and you know what? Never mind. Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me get this straight. Stuart, it's 20 miles an hour is the threshold for a must appear in a reckless driving acknowledge. In other words, the police officer writes you a reckless driving ticket, you're going 20 miles over the speed limit. According to this bill, it must appear. Is that correct?
It is currently as it's drafted, but like I said, I understand the chairman doesn't like the must appear, and so I'm going to go ahead after the hearing and submit a sponsor amendment to nix that out of the bill.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, the court system's going to get jammed up.
Yeah,
just,
I hear you. And we
just
dealt with
between
that.
Centerville and the Bay Bridge, when I come over, you got to do about 25 over to keep up.
Well, that's part of the problem, Delegate Jacobs, is I think
If
that
you're,
speed
if you're
vehicles
weaving in
are now
and out of traffic, you know, like just trying to maneuver, would that be considered?
The chairman was busting your chops.
well, you know, obviously police officers have a ton of discretion when they write these tickets. You know, we're not talking about speed cameras, and a lot of times, I mean, I've personally been pulled over in Virginia, so I mean, my hands are not clean. I've been pulled over in Virginia, and I was clocked at going 22 miles per hour over the speed limit, and the police officer was nice enough to knock it down so that it was not a reckless driving, and I did not have to must appear. But I will tell you, since that incident happened in my early 20s, I have never even approached that many miles per hour over in Virginia. I was scared spook. So this stuff works, even if it can seem a little bit harsh. But no, in terms of, you know, having to speed up to avoid people, I mean, I think that that's something that law enforcement officers, you know, look the other way on all the time if you're not, you know, speeding consistently at a certain speed.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer, but you should have made it at least 22.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it in subcommittee. Thank you.
I think that would probably be an ethics violation.
Yeah. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Stewart. I am really wondering, though, first of all, whether Delegate Anderton is sitting at a gas station. Or weird. Anyway, I guess it goes along with the theme of the bill. But Delegate Stewart, for motorists to be stopped or ticketed going this fast, obviously this would have to be registered, I guess, with police radar, because it raises the issue, and I'm all for this. I think it's a great idea, but it raises a question that came up on a call that I was on with a bunch of community activists in both Montgomery and Prince George's with police who, you know, we're talking about the problem of racing and how cameras are calibrated only to catch anybody going 12 miles or more over the speed limit. Did you think about how to, you know, that first of all, that a lot of motorists are not going to be caught. It's great whoever is caught, but any thoughts on that? And then also, what about any concerns that this would lead to high-speed chases? Because how else does a police officer that's sitting on a roadside, you know, witnessing a motorist going 40, 50 miles an hour over catch up to that person?
Right. Both really good questions. And first, yeah, I also appreciated the Wawa background that Delegate Anderton has, and I assume it's for our bills today. I personally, as someone whose bill is hearing this today, I personally appreciate it. To your first question, I believe that we would have to buy new equipment. So I think counties would have to upgrade their speed cameras if they were to comply, you know, or if they were to do anything other than the 12 miles per hour thing. And they would at least have to recalibrate it. So the law enforcement officials I talked to did not recommend that step just because I think it would involve a lot of headache for local jurisdictions with speed cameras. But I'm open to it. I'm certainly not opposed to the idea of trying to, empower our speed cameras to do more than just 12 over. But I think it's just a little bit of a logistical headache. The second point about, officers, and I'm sure, Delegate Frazier-Hidalgo would be the first to tell you, officers are told not to engage in high-speed chases. If someone's going 40 miles per hour over, they do not chase them. And that is the correct policy because we don't want, extra loss of life from these high-speed chases. And this proposes an enforcement problem, obviously. I mean, that's part of the reason that we have so much, so much speeding and racing and whatnot is because it's tough to enforce, especially when police budgets are crunched. But what the social science research says is that if you want to deter speeding, it is a combination of probability of detection, in other words, enforcement, and magnitude of penalty. In other words, what's the penalty? Those two combine to create effective deterrence. So in a situation where it's rare that police can actually catch someone who's going so many miles per hour over, 20, 30, 40, because they don't want to engage in a high speed chase. The only time they get them, is either that if they feel like they can safely, there are not a whole lot of cars on the road, they feel like they can safely go after them if they're going 25 over, or in the case of, they hit a straightaway and they go 25 over, but then they stop at a stoplight, for example. And then so police, the police can still get them occasionally, but it's tough. And so in cases, what the social science research says and all the studies are, in cases where enforcement is difficult, you need to make sure that the penalties are stiff and that the standards are easy to understand. Right now, the reckless driving standard is so complicated that police officers rarely use it because how do you prove that someone had a willful or wanton disregard for driving, right? You don't. And so it's much easier to use numbers, 20, 30, 50, whatever. And, as Delegate Jacobs, as I alluded to earlier, Delegate Jacobs, I'm happy to, for the subcommittee to do its normal work on exactly what the right number is. But I think having some objective standard would go a long way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to add in on that piece before I get to my question, because I do have a question. A lot of this is done through automatic license plate readers. For the reason of not getting into high-speed chases. So law enforcement does have the ability to find these folks. Not all of them, but a lot of them, because a lot of cars are equipped with automatic license plate readers, which leads me to my question. And that is, I noticed that there is no law enforcement testimony. Have you spoken with law enforcement and where do they fall on this bill?
That was just because I asked everyone that they've already been to 3 hearings already because they did the Senate side hearing of my first bill, the House side bill of my first bill, and the Senate side hearing of this bill. So I told Colonel Anderson and John Singh and the other people I had testified not to worry about this one just because they're hearing out. But yes, this bill was created in conjunction with law enforcement at the MDTA and a number of other different agencies. I can't speak for every law enforcement official, obviously, but this is a bill coming from their mind, not mine.
Well, it would be nice. It would be nice if they could email us a letter.
Yeah, I'll get Colonel Anderson to follow up the email to the subcommittee. That's a fair point.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you.
And, are you okay? I guess so. Yeah. All right. Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to preface my question with this teeny tiny story. Most of you know that I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio.
No, really? I hadn't heard that. The mistake on the lake? I hadn't heard that.
The mistake on the lake. And in my much younger days, one of my first assignments in the military was in the Presidential Honor Guard at the White House. I was called to get back to the White House, leaving Cleveland, going through Pennsylvania. At the time, the speed limit was 70. I was going in excess of 20 miles over the speed limit. And the Pennsylvania State Trooper actually put me in jail because I was going over the speed limit. Rightfully so. Rightfully so. I mean, ultimately, he let me go because I showed him orders I had to get to the White House real quick. But my question is that, does this bill require that a policeman immediately put someone in jail, or do they have to just go to court and pay the fine later? Because that was my only time being stuck behind bars. It was not, although I was only there for a small period of time, it was not very, very pleasant.
Before you answer that, Delegate Stewart, I have a question for Delegate Holmes. So did you have President Hoover call the police?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, the Pony Express was a little bit slow, so I did get out eventually.
Okay, Delegate Stewart.
Yeah, well, Delegate Holmes, in the same spirit, there's never been a bill on the subject, so I've never been able to tell the full story, but I also have a great arrest story where one time I violated prohibition law by possessing alcohol in a dry county in Alabama, and I spent the night in jail, actually. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's a fun story. I'll delve into it if there's ever a relevant bill. But to answer, there's no jail time associated with reckless driving, period. So even if we make it easier for cops to assess reckless driving because we put an objective standard on it, nobody's going to jail. I'm not trying to increase the amount of people going to jail. And the must appear piece is in the current version of the bill, but like I said, I'm going to take that out. So I'm going to follow up with the subcommittee to both take that out and to send a letter from Carl Anderson. So I've got my marching orders and my homework from my chairman.
Thank you.
And by the way, if it turns out a couple of years from now that we have to add it, I mean, I'll entertain changing the law at that point.
Yeah, I'm hoping this will be enough. I'm hoping this will be enough to keep the Virginians down there and stop them from coming up here.
You good, Marvin? Okay. Any further questions for the sponsor of the bill? Seeing none yet. Vaughn, if you could get them to email us a letter and put it in the file, that would be good. So, okay, that ends the public hearing. It's only 2:30, and so we have lots of time for subcommittees to do work so that we'll be able to, Cornbread, where are you getting these backgrounds? Okay, announcements.
Yes, I have one.
Okay, go ahead, Delegate Healy.
Yes, the local government and bi-county agency subcommittee will meet today in 15 minutes.
Not too many bills though, right?
We only have 2 bills to discuss.
Okay, any other announcements? Fraser Dago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The motor vehicle subcommittee will meet at 3 o'clock today.
Okay, anybody?
Can I get?
I think any other subcommittee chairs? Otherwise, I'm going to recognize Delegate Ciliberti, who had his finger in the air.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief FYI, today is the Right to Life March, starting at the Capitol at about 4:30.
Okay.
Testimony over.
Okay. Any other announcements for the good of the committee? If not, thank you very much. See you. We'll have our voting session tomorrow. See you then, and try and get lots of work done in subcommittee. Take care.